The obsidian dais of the sanctum of concordance hung suspended in a silent void, a disk of polished stone that seemed to drink the light from the holographic starfields swirling in the fathomless chamber below. Upon it stood the high counselors, beings of staggering diversity, their forms cloaked in the gravitas of 1,000 generations of galactic stewardship. There were the Glyptons, crystalline sentinels whose thoughts moved at the speed of geological epochs, the Lumina, shimmering columns of coherent energy that spoke in resonant chimes, and the Cathar, insectoid scholars whose multifaceted eyes saw history in layers. Presiding over them all was High Counselor Vorlag of the Cathar, his chitinous carapace the color of ancient rust, his posture bowed not by age, but by the immeasurable weight of memory. Today, that weight felt heavier than ever, a pressure building in the very soul of the concordance. The silence in the sanctum was not peaceful. It was a vacuum, pregnant with a fear that dared not speak its name. For generations, it had been a ghost story, a myth whispered in the secure data streams of military strategists and the fevered dreams of junior attachés. A cautionary tale about a primitive species, barely post-gravitic, who had suffered a great and terrible loss and had, according to the legend, sworn an impossible vengeance. The debate, when it finally broke the suffocating quiet, was initiated by Praetor Kalen of the Xylos' hegemony. The Xylos were sleek, silver-skinned humanoids, their forms a testament to genetic perfection and a culture of unapologetic dominance. Kalen's voice was like sheared metal, sharp and disdainful. "This council wastes its cycles on phantom signals and nursery terrors," he began, his gaze sweeping over the assembled beings with contempt. "The anomaly at the periphery of the Veil Nebula is a stellar phenomenon, a quantum ghost. To suggest it is the mythical human, vengeance ship, is an insult to the intelligence of every species gathered here. The humans were a nascent power, a spark we rightly extinguished before it could become a fire. Their capacity for such a vessel, for such a sustained and singular purpose across centuries, is non-existent." He gestured to the swirling star map, where a single uncertain glyph blinked with maddening persistence. They were scattered, broken. Their nascent interstellar presence was cauterized. The silencing of Elysium 7 was a regrettable but necessary act of galactic sanitation, sanctioned by this very council. It is a closed matter. Vorlag shifted, the plates of his carapace scraping softly, a sound like grinding stone that drew every eye. His own multifaceted gaze was fixed on Kalen, and within their crystalline depths the Praetor's reflection was fractured into 1,000 arrogant shards. "A closed matter, Praetor." Vorlag's voice was a low thrum, the sound of tectonic plates shifting deep beneath the earth. "History is never closed. It is merely unread. You call it a myth. The Cathar have a different word for such stories, a promise. We have studied the humans from afar long before their formal contact. Their psychology is not like ours. The Lumina seek harmony. The Glyptons seek permanence. Your people, the Xylos, seek dominion. The humans, they seek meaning. And they build their most enduring monuments not from stone or energy, but from memory." He paused, letting the silence stretch again, this time filled with his own profound disquiet. The loss they suffered at Elysium 7 was not merely a tactical defeat. It was the obliteration of a generation, the cradle of their first interstellar colony. They do not forget such things. They carve them into their very being. To underestimate their capacity for a long and patient hatred is a failure of imagination we can ill afford. The Lumina shimmered, their chimes echoing in the chamber, a melody of pure logic laced with a strange, harmonic sorrow. "The energy signature of the anomaly is improbable," they resonated. "It does not conform to known stellar mechanics or hyperlane echoes. It is singular, deliberate. Its output is masked, cloaked by a technology that actively manipulates spacetime foam. Such a thing should not be possible for a civilization at their recorded technological level." This admission, coming from the Lumina, who were masters of energy and physics, sent a fresh wave of unease through the sanctum. The glyph on the map pulsed again, a steady, rhythmic beat like a cosmic heart. It was moving, not along the established hyperlanes that crisscrossed the galaxy like a spider's web, but through the deep, untraveled void between them, taking a path that was direct, inexorable, and aimed squarely at the core worlds of the concordance. It was a journey that should have taken millennia. This object had been tracked for less than a standard cycle, and it was already at their doorstep. Praetor Kalen scoffed, a gesture of refined dismissiveness. "A clever rogue. Element, perhaps, a relic from some forgotten war piloted by pirates. To attribute this to the humans is to grant them a power they never possessed. The records of the silencing are clear. Their fleet was annihilated, their colony purified. There were no survivors to build such a ghost ship." But Vorlag saw the faint tremor in Kalen's hand as he gestured. the subtle tightening around his eyes. The Xylos knew more than they had shared. The official report, a document Vorlag had studied until its data glyphs were seared into his memory, spoke of a virulent biological agent on Elysium-7, a threat so dire that total sterilization was the only option. The Concordants, fearing a plague, had sanctioned the Xylos' hegemony's preemptive strike. But the evidence had always been thin, the Xylos' haste too eager. Vorlag had long suspected the truth was darker, a truth hidden beneath layers of political expediency and Xylos' pride. The sensor readings from the silencing were heavily redacted by your hegemony, Praetor, Vorlag stated, his voice level but carrying an undeniable accusation. You claimed it was to prevent panic, but what if it was to conceal the nature of their technology? What if their potential was far greater than we were led to believe? A species that builds with memory may also build with grief, and a battleship powered by grief, that is a foe for which our doctrines have no answer. The High Counselor of the Glyptons, a towering figure of faceted living quartz, shifted its colossal form. Its voice was the grinding of continents, a slow and deliberate rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the dais. We have observed. The object moves without a detectable propulsion signature. It does not push against space-time. It falls. It is as if it has identified a destination and is simply allowing the universe to bring it there. This is a form of transit that borders on the philosophical. It is not engineering. It is an act of will. The chamber fell silent once more, an act of will. The concept was alien to most of them. Their technologies were extensions of logic, of mathematics, of the predictable laws of the universe. To suggest a vessel could be willed across the stars was to speak of magic, of a power that defied rational understanding. It was the stuff of myths, and the myth was now entering the capital system. On the main holographic display, the view shifted from the galactic map to a real-time feed from the system's deep-range sensor arrays. The glyph resolved. It was no longer a point of light but a shape, a silhouette against the distant stars. It was impossibly vast, a shard of absolute blackness that seemed to consume the light around it. It was a design of brutalist functionality, devoid of the elegant curves of Xylos cruisers or the crystalline symmetry of Glypton vessels. It was a weapon, and it wore its purpose like a shroud. There were no running lights, no identifying signals, no hailing frequencies. It was a silent, monolithic tomb gliding through the void with an unnatural grace, its target the very heart of the Concordance. The mythical battleship was real, and as it drifted into the system's gravitational embrace, every being in the sanctum felt a cold, primal certainty grip them. It had not come to talk, it had come for revenge. The air in the sanctum grew thin, charged with the ozone of unspoken terror. The vessel, now clearly visible on the main hollow display, was a monstrosity of function over form. Its hull was a patchwork of alloys, some gleaming with the dark, iridescent sheen of advanced metamaterials, others bearing the pitted, scarred texture of ages spent in the hard vacuum of the deep void. It was not a ship that had been built. It was a ship that had been forged, hammered into existence by a singular, burning purpose. Jagged structures, reminiscent of brutalist architecture, jutted from its spine, not as decorative elements, but as weapon emplacements of a design so alien, so utilitarian, that they defied conventional classification. It was a fortress, a cathedral of vengeance, and its mere presence warped the local sensor grids, causing them to flicker and return ghost images, as if the ship itself was a wound in reality. A fleet of Concordance patrol vessels, sleek and formidable in their own right, moved to intercept, their engines leaving faint cerulean trails in the black. They were the pride of the capital's defense force, a symbol of the Concordance's unassailable power. Against the silent intruder, they looked like toys. "Open a channel," Vorlag commanded, his voice cutting through the paralysis that had seized the council. "All frequencies, standard diplomatic protocols, identify it, demand its intent." The communication officers, their own chitinous appendages trembling slightly, complied. A broad-spectrum signal was sent, a message of peace and inquiry, the universal greeting of the Concordance. It was a message that had halted wars, forged Alia, and brought hundreds of species into the galactic fold. The signal washed over the dark hull of the battleship and was met with absolute, profound silence. The ship did not acknowledge, did not deviate, did not react in any way. It simply continued its slow, inexorable fall toward the capital planet, a silent judgment descending from the heavens. Praetor Kalen's composure finally fractured. "This insolence cannot be tolerated." He snarled, his silver skin flushed with a dark, angry hue. "It is a threat. A derelict perhaps, but a kinetic threat nonetheless. Commander of the defense fleet, fire a warning shot." A plasma burst across its bow. "Let us see if this ghost has a pulse." The order was given, a reluctant acknowledgement rippling through the fleet command. A Xylo's destroyer, its forward lance glowing with incandescent energy, discharged a bolt of contained plasma. It was a demonstration of power, a precise and controlled burst designed to intimidate, not to destroy. The bolt, blazing with the heat of a small star, streaked across the void. And then something impossible happened. As the plasma approached the battleship, the space around the vessel seemed to shimmer, to thicken. There was no shield flare, no energy dispersal, no physical interception. The bolt of plasma simply vanished. It was not blocked or deflected. It was consumed, absorbed into the ship's oppressive silence as if it had never existed. A collective gasp, a chorus of clicks, chimes, and subvocalizations echoed through the sanctum. Technology like that was not merely advanced. It was foundational, a manipulation of physics that the Concordance, for all its millennia of accumulated knowledge, had only theorized. They consumed it, Illumina resonated, its light fluctuating with agitated disbelief. The energy was not nullified, it was integrated. The vessel's power signature increased by the precise amount of energy contained within the plasma burst. It is feeding. The implication was horrifying. The ship did not just defend, it grew stronger from attacks. It was a predator, and the Concordance had just offered it a morsel. Kalen was stunned into silence, his arrogance evaporating in a cold sweat of fear. He had prodded a leviathan, and it had not even deigned to flinch. Vorlag felt a grim certainty solidifying in his mind. This was no pirate. This was no derelict. This was the culmination of a human promise. He looked at the silent, brooding shape on the screen, and for the first time he tried to see it not as an enemy, but as the humans might see it. He saw the scars not as damage, but as history. He saw the brutalist design not as a lack of artistry, but as a testament to resolve. And he saw its silence not as emptiness, but as a solemn, patient waiting. Then a channel opened. It was not a broad-spectrum hail, but a narrow, focused beam, aimed with surgical precision directly at the sanctum of Concordance. There was no video feed, no holographic avatar. There was only a voice. It was female, calm, and carried an unnatural clarity across the void, as if she were standing in the chamber with them. Her voice was devoid of passion, of anger, of hatred. It was the voice of a machine executing its primary function, or of a judge reading a final, unappealable sentence. "This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the human remnant vessel Vengeance Asterisk," the voice stated. The name of the ship hung in the air, a confirmation of their deepest fears, a word that was both a name and a declaration of intent. "We are here to address an unresolved crime. We are here to demand a reckoning for the silencing of Elysium 7. Praetor Kalen, finding his voice again, sputtered with a mixture of fear and bravado. "Crime. Your colony harbored a plague that threatened this entire sector. The actions of the Xylo's hegemony were a painful but necessary quarantine, sanctioned by this council." The silence that followed his outburst was more terrifying than any threat. The voice of Admiral Rostova returned, its unnerving calm unchanged. "There was no plague, that was a fabrication. We have the proof. We have the memory." Vorlag's mandibles clicked softly. Memory, the word he had used himself. "What proof?" he asked, his own voice steady, trying to steer the confrontation away from Kalen's panicked aggression. "What memory do you speak of, Admiral?" "The Vengeance is not merely a warship, High Counselor," Rostova explained, her tone softening almost imperceptibly as she addressed Vorlag. "It is an archive, a memorial. Its central core is a quantum mnemonic processor, woven with the psychic echoes of every man, woman, and child who died on Elysium 7. We did not find their bodies. But we found their final thoughts, their fear, their confusion as your Xylo's fleet opened fire on civilian habitats without warning. We have their final moments stored and preserved. That is our proof. That is our memory." The chamber was utterly still. The concept was grotesque, yet sublime, a ship powered by the ghosts of the dead, a vessel whose crew navigated by the light of a fading massacre. It was a technology born not of science, but of sheer, unrelenting grief. "This is an absurdity," Kalen hissed, though his voice lacked conviction. "Psychic echoes, this is primitive superstition, not evidence." "Is it, Praetor?" Rostova's voice acquired a razor's edge of cold precision. "Your fleet commander at Elysium 7 was a decorated officer named Xyler. He transmitted a final, encrypted report to the Xylo's high command before initiating the orbital bombardment. He reported 0 biological threats. He reported the successful containment of what he called a cognition hazard of non-human origin. He then expressed his profound reservations about the order to cleanse the civilian population. A population, I will add, that had already surrendered and was awaiting Concordance mediators. We have that transmission." Kalen's silver face went pale, the color of bleached bone. The secret, the true reason for the silencing, was out. A lie held for centuries had just been shattered by a voice from a ghost ship. The Concordance counselors turned their collective gaze upon Kalen, a silent, crushing weight of accusation. The political ground was fracturing beneath the Xylo's hegemony. "We have come not for war, but for justice," the human voice continued, its calmness a stark contrast to the rising tension in the sanctum. "The Xylo's hegemony will answer for its crime. They will open their archives. They will surrender the architects of the Elysium 7 atrocity, and they will face a penance of our choosing. These are not negotiations. This is the sentence." Praetor Kalen, cornered and exposed, made a final, desperate gamble. He accessed a private command channel, his fingers flying across his personal data slate. "The lies of a ghost will not break the hegemony," he roared, his voice broadcast now to the defense fleet. "This vessel is a threat to the sovereignty of the Concordance. Open fire, all ships, destroy that abomination." The order was given. The Concordance fleet, bound by duty, obeyed. A storm of plasma, laser, and kinetic munitions erupted from the assembled vessels, a wave of destructive energy that could have scoured the surface of a continent. It converged on the silent, dark shape of the Vengeance Asterisk. The Council watched, transfixed in horror and morbid anticipation. This time, the space around the human ship did not just shimmer. It folded. In a breathtaking display of gravitational control, the Vengeance bent spacetime into a shield. The incoming projectiles and energy beams were not blocked. Their trajectories were warped, their paths twisted until they were redirected, curving harmlessly around the ship's hull and dissipating into the void. Not a single shot landed. The onslaught, a testament to the Concordance's military might, was rendered utterly impotent. Then the Vengeance responded. It did not fire a weapon. No lasers, no missiles. Instead, dozens of small apertures opened along its hull, and from them threads of shimmering, golden energy lashed out, striking each Concordance ship with perfect accuracy. The ships did not explode. Their engines simply died. Their weapons systems went dark. Their life support flickered and stabilized on emergency power. In a matter of seconds, the entire defense fleet was neutralized, left drifting and helpless in the cold darkness of space. It was not a battle. It was a lesson in power. In the sanctum, the silence was absolute. The myth was not just real, it was a god. A quiet, patient, and wrathful god that had just effortlessly disarmed the guardians of their most sacred world. Admiral Rostova's voice returned, as calm as ever, but now imbued with the unassailable authority of demonstrated power. "We did not come to destroy. We came to remind. The Xylo's hegemony has one cycle to comply. If they refuse, we will activate the Echo of Souls. The central core of this vessel will broadcast the last moments of Elysium 7 not as data, but as direct experience. Every living Xylos on their homeworld will feel the fire. They will hear the screams of our children. They will experience the terror and the betrayal. Their entire species will be forced to live our memory. We will not commit genocide. We will simply ensure our suffering is never forgotten." The threat was more profound than any orbital bombardment. It was not a weapon against the body, but against the soul of a civilization. It was a promise of a shared nightmare, a forced empathy so total it would shatter their culture. This was human revenge, not an eye for an eye, but a memory for a memory. Vorlag looked from the paralyzed face of Praetor Kalen to the image of the great, dark ship, a silent monument to a grief that had been forged into an unbreakable sword. The humans had not just built a battleship. They had weaponized memory itself. The ultimatum delivered by Admiral Rostova hung in the sanctum like a neurotoxin, paralyzing the political will of the Concordance. The concept of the Echo of Souls was a psychological horror beyond their comprehension. The Glyptons, whose existence was a serene and detached observation, could not process the idea of forced, violent emotion on a planetary scale. The Lumina, beings of pure energy, resonated with a harmonic of deep distress, their forms wavering as if in pain at the mere thought of such a psychic violation. Even the other, more martial species on the Council shifted uncomfortably. They understood warfare, the destruction of ships and cities, the cold calculus of casualties. They did not understand this. This was not war, it was a spiritual vivisection. Praetor Kalen stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning terror. His entire culture was predicated on emotional discipline, on the suppression of weakness, on a rigid caste system that valued cold logic above all. The threat of a forced tidal wave of raw, unfiltered human terror was enough to unravel the very fabric of their society. It was a fate worse than extinction. Vorlag seized the moment of stunned silence. He stepped forward, his ancient frame radiating a sudden, fierce authority. "The Xylo's hegemony has brought this judgment upon itself," he declared, his voice resonating with the weight of centuries. "For generations, they have been the mailed fist of the Concordance, their ambition tolerated in the name of security. We allowed ourselves to believe their narrative of Elysium 7 because it was convenient. We feared a plague, yes, but we also feared the unpredictable trajectory of a new species, humanity. We chose ignorance over truth. Today, the truth has come for us, aboard a vessel forged in the fires of our negligence. He turned his multifaceted eyes directly on Kalen. The time for lies is over, Praetor. The Concordance demands the full unredacted archives of the silencing. We demand an explanation for the cognition hazard your commander reported. And we demand that the Xylo's leadership submit to the justice sought by the humans. The alternative is the psychic scarring of your entire species, a wound from which your hegemony will never recover. The other counselors, shaken from their stupor, began to voice their assent. The Lumina chimed in agreement. The Glypton rumbled its consensus. One by one, the representatives of the Concordance abandoned the Xylos, isolating them in their guilt. Kalen, seeing his support evaporate, finally broke. His refined posture collapsed, and for the first time, a Xylo's Praetor looked not proud but small, defeated. He transmitted a series of frantic, encrypted messages to his homeworld. The council watched, waiting. The cycle was a long, agonizing period of silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the Sanctum's life support and the steady, patient pulse of the Vengeance on the main display, a silent sentinel holding a world's soul hostage. Finally, a message returned. Kalen read it, and the last vestiges of color drained from his face. He nodded slowly, a gesture of complete and utter surrender. "The hegemony complies," he whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Aboard the Vengeance a secure channel opened between Admiral Rostova and High Counselor Vorlag. This time a visual was offered. A simple holographic projection appeared before Vorlag's dais, a woman in a stark, functional dark gray uniform. Her face was etched with lines of weariness that went far beyond her years, but her eyes, a pale, piercing gray, held a formidable calm. She was not gloating. She was not triumphant. She was simply present. A custodian of a terrible duty. "High Counselor Vorlag," she said, her voice the same as the one that had held the galaxy in its thrall. "We acknowledge the hegemony's compliance. The transfer of the guilty parties and the archival data will begin immediately." "Admiral Rostova," Vorlag responded, inclining his head in a gesture of respect he had not offered another species in centuries. "Your methods are profound. You had the power to annihilate them, to destroy their fleet, their world. Why choose this path?" "A path of forced memory?" Eva Rostova's expression didn't change, but her eyes seemed to look into a vast, sorrowful distance. "Because destruction is an end, High Counselor. It teaches nothing. We did not build the Vengeance to erase the Xylos from the galaxy. We built it to ensure what they did would never be erased from history. We wanted them to understand the nature of their crime, not just to be punished for it. Memory is the foundation of ethics. Without it, a species is doomed to repeat its darkest moments. We are not giving them a punishment. We are giving them a conscience." The philosophical depth of her statement struck Vorlag with the force of a physical blow. The humans, this species they had dismissed as primitive and emotional, were operating on a level of ethical sophistication that met. The Concordance's cold pragmatism seemed childish. They had not come for blood. They had come to teach the most painful lesson imaginable. As the Xylos data archives were decrypted and streamed to the Concordance's central servers, the full, ugly truth of Elysium 7 was laid bare. The colonists had not discovered a plague. They had unearthed an artifact. A deep strata probe had uncovered a small, derelict object of impossible age, buried for eons beneath the planet's crust. The object was broadcasting a signal, faint but complex, a structured pattern that was clearly artificial but utterly alien. It was this signal that the Xylo's commander had labeled a cognition hazard. Their scientists could not decipher it, but exposure to it induced a state of profound dread and paranoia in their telepathically sensitive species. Fearing a weapon, a psychic virus, or simply the unknown, the Xylo's high command had made a decision born of terror and arrogance. They chose not to study, not to report, but to silence. They destroyed the artifact and exterminated every living witness who had been exposed to its signal, fabricating the story of a plague to justify their genocide to the Concordance. "The lie was born of fear," Vorlag murmured, watching the data scroll across a private monitor. "They committed an atrocity to hide their own cowardice." "That is the nature of most evil, High Counselor," Rostova's voice replied from the hologram. "But that is not the end of the story. The signal was not a weapon. We have spent the last 3 centuries studying the fragments of it we recovered from the psychic echoes in the mnemonic core. We followed its trail, not just to find the Xylos, but to find its source." Her calm demeanor finally shifted, replaced by a gravity that chilled Vorlag to his core. When the Xylos fleet bombarded Elysium 7, the sheer energy release of their weapons interacting with the artifact created a scar in space-time, a resonance that pointed back to the signal's origin. The Vengeance was not just following the ghost of a Xylo's fleet, it was navigating along the echo of a message that is billions of years old. She raised her hand, and the main display in the sanctum, which had shown the neutralized Xylo's fleet, changed. It was now a swirling, chaotic visualization of a complex waveform, a signal of such labyrinthine intricacy that it made the minds of the council members ache to behold it. "This is the signal," Rostova said, her voice low and somber. "It is not a message of greeting. It is not a beacon of discovery. We have managed to translate only fragments, but the meaning is unambiguous." A profound silence descended as every being in the sanctum focused on the alien pattern. The signal was not just data, it felt alive, imbued with a cold, patient, and ravenous intelligence. It felt like the sound of teeth grinding in the dark between galaxies. "What does it say?" Vorlag asked, his own ancient courage faltering in the face of this cosmic dread. Admiral Rostova's gray eyes met his. "It is a map and a designation. It maps cyclical harvest routes through this galactic arm, and it designates life-bearing worlds with a single repeating concept for which our language has only one approximate word: pantry." The word fell into the chamber with the weight of a dying star. Pantry, not worlds, not civilizations, not life. Food. They were living in a cosmic larder, and something ancient and unimaginably powerful held the key. The silencing of Elysium 7 had not been the crime the Concordants had thought it was. It was worse. The Xylos, in their terrified ignorance, had tried to smash a strange lock they found on the door, and in doing so had alerted the owner of the house that someone was inside. "The signal has grown stronger in the last decade," Rostova continued, her voice now a solemn toll. "We believe the energy signature from the artifact's destruction acted as a ping, a confirmation that one of its designated worlds had achieved a certain level of technological capability, a sign that the harvest was ripe." The grand, political drama of the Vengeance and its quest for revenge suddenly seemed small, a prelude to a conflict of existential, cosmic proportions. The ship, a monument to a past massacre, had inadvertently become the sole sentinel guarding against a future apocalypse. Its long, slow journey across the void had not just been a pursuit of justice, it had been a race against the coming dawn of a galactic night. The humans, driven by their grief, had stumbled upon a truth so terrible that the mighty Concordance had slept through its warning whispers for millennia. A new understanding dawned in Vorlag's multifaceted eyes. He looked at the holographic image of the human admiral, a representative of a species they had dismissed, a species they had allowed to be brutalized. He saw not a primitive upstart, but a guardian. Humanity's obsession with memory, with justice, with the ghosts of their past. Been a weakness. It had been their greatest strength. It had forced them to look into the abyss to build a vessel capable of navigating the darkest waters, and in doing so they had seen the true Leviathan lurking in the depths. "What do we do?" Vorlag asked, the question not one of a high counselor to a subordinate, but of one soul to another, facing the encroaching dark. Admiral Eva Rostova's gaze was unflinching. "For 3 centuries we have grieved, we have remembered, and we have prepared." The Vengeance was not only built to deliver a sentence. Its weapons are not just for disabling fleets. They were designed to fight something that does not adhere to our physics, something that considers entire star systems to be disposable resources. She gestured to the image of her ship, the dark, brutalist fortress floating silently in the void. This mythical battleship came for revenge. It found a reason for a war far greater than any of us imagined. The hologram flickered, and beside her appeared a star chart, but not of their galaxy. It was a map of the void between galaxies, and in the fathomless dark, a single point of light was moving, its trajectory aimed directly at them. "The harvesters are coming," Rostova said, her voice no longer just the sound of a human admiral, but the voice of a new reality, a grim and terrible dawn. And humanity's vengeance must now become the Concordance's salvation. The council was silent, the great and powerful beings of the galaxy humbled, their political squabbles and ancient rivalries rendered meaningless. They stared at the approaching light, and for the first time in 10,000 years they knew true, unified, and absolute fear. The ghost that had haunted them was real, but it was not their greatest enemy. It was their only hope.